Good evening, I'm Faye Kwan. Tonight, top stories from the United Nations General Assembly. As Israel steps up its offensive in Gaza, world leaders gather to back a Palestinian state. That and more coming up on AWANI International. Dozens of world leaders gathered at the United Nations on Monday to back a Palestinian state, a landmark diplomatic shift nearly 2 years into the Gaza war. France joined the UK, Canada, Australia and Portugal in formally recognizing Palestinian statehood, despite resistance from Israel and its ally, the US. Speaking at the conference hosted by France and Saudi Arabia, President Emmanuel Macron says the move was necessary to break the cycle of violence and secure peace.
Le temps est venu de libérer les 48 otages détenus par le Hamas. Le temps est venu d'arrêter la guerre, les bombardements à Gaza, les massacres et les populations en fuite. Le temps est venu car l'urgence est partout. Le temps de la paix est venu car nous sommes à quelques instants de ne plus pouvoir la saisir.
Meanwhile, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called for Hamas to surrender its weapons, saying the group will have no role in governing Gaza in the future.
لن يكون لحماس دور في الحكم وعليها وغيرها من الفصائل تسليم السلاح للسلطة الفلسطينية لأننا نريد دولة واحدة غير مسلحة وقانونا واحدا وقوات أمن شرعية واحدة.
Abbas spoke remotely after he and his delegation were denied visa access to attend the meeting in New York. He added that within 3 months of the war's end, an interim constitution would be drafted to ensure a smooth transfer of power. So far, 149 out of 193 UN member states have recognized a Palestinian state. More than 65,000 people have been killed in Israeli attacks on Gaza since October 2023.
Meanwhile, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto reaffirmed Indonesia's support for a two-state solution, calling it the only path to lasting peace. He also signaled readiness to establish diplomatic ties with Israel, but only if Palestine achieves statehood. This is not the first time Prabowo has raised the prospect of normalizing ties with Israel. He made a similar statement when hosting French President Emmanuel Macron in May, during which he said that Israel had the right to stand as a sovereign country. The remark made international headlines and stirred concerns over a possible shift in Indonesia's long-held foreign policy.
While recognition of Palestine by Western powers mark a diplomatic shift, it may not signal an immediate end to the conflict. Rowena Abdul Razak from SOAS University of London weighs in on the significance of the move at the UN General Assembly and if it offers any concrete guarantees towards a solution for Palestinians.
I think there is something very important, especially the United Kingdom recognizing Palestine. After all, it was the United Kingdom that created Israel through the Balfour Declaration back in 1917. It was with the Balfour Declaration that saw the creation of an Israeli state on Palestinian land. So in a way, this is a very symbolic, if a little bit ironic move that now Britain is recognizing Palestine. So it's kind of trying to, as much as it can, correct the wrong that it has created in its history. So this is symbolic. France coming to the fore as well to recognize Palestinian statehood, also very important because of France's own sort of colonial history in the region. So there is the historical significance, there is the significance of the momentum that we're seeing with Palestine. I've said before that this move towards Palestinian, the recognition of Palestinian statehood and the awareness that we're seeing of the Palestinian movement is very strong. It's the strongest it has ever been, as we've seen with the protests and so on.
However, Rowena cautioned that meaningful change is unlikely as the US continues to assert support for Israel.
Because the US is still backing Israel so strongly, I mean, it just vetoed another, UN move for Palestine. We're still going to see difficulties in seeing Palestine truly recognized, truly free. So recognizing Palestine, great, but what kind of Palestine are we going to be left with? And the only thing that might be good with the recognition of Palestine is that increasingly the US and Israel are going to be isolated internationally. Hopefully this means that their policies to continue the genocide in Gaza might just appear even more internationally isolated, and that might stop them maybe, or at least definitely decrease the justification that they've been giving themselves to continue what they've been doing in Gaza.
Now, with Israel moving to annex the West Bank, urgent measures are needed to stop the atrocities. Rowena outlines what concrete steps must be taken following recognition of Palestine.
Firstly, there needs to be a permanent ceasefire. So the ceasefire has to stop. The Israeli campaign in Gaza has to stop, because now that these countries have recognized Palestine, it's going to be harder and harder for Israel to continue its campaign, because its campaign has always been, they want to get rid of Hamas. But if Britain, France has now recognized Palestine, that is a kind of recognition of Hamas as a power in Gaza. So ceasefire is the most important thing. And then from then on, we need to think about rebuilding. We need to make sure that the settlements, the illegal settlements in the West Bank, which has been declared an illegal settlement, has been declared illegal by the UN, even by previous US administrations have called the settlements in West Bank illegal. Those need to be reversed. No point to have a Palestinian state with no land.
We'll be back with more after the break. Stay tuned.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Welcome back. Tech giant Oracle is set to take the lead in overseeing TikTok's algorithm and security under a deal brokered by the Trump administration. President Donald Trump is expected to issue an executive order later this week that declares the terms of the deal meet the security concerns laid out by the law.
Under the plan, TikTok's US arm would be controlled by a group of American and international investors, while its Chinese parent ByteDance would keep less than a 20% stake. According to a White House official, Oracle would head the venture, likely alongside Silver Lake Partners, with talks also involving Rupert Murdoch and Michael Dell. The United States government itself would not take a stake or board seat. The deal still needs regulatory clearance and Beijing's approval. TikTok has around 170 million users in the United States, and Congress has ordered the app to shut down there by January 2025, unless its American assets are sold.
A group of U.S. lawmakers on a rare visit to Beijing has raised the prospect of a deal that could see China buying as many as 500 Boeing jets. This would be a major breakthrough in the world's second-largest aviation market after years of stalled orders amid trade tensions between the two countries.
The bipartisan delegation is led by Democratic Representative Adam Smith, who met with Premier Li Qiang on Sunday, as well as China's economy and defense ministers. U.S. Ambassador to China David Perdue said negotiations on the Boeing deal could be in their final days or weeks, calling it very important to the president. According to a Bloomberg report last month, Boeing has been in talks to sell up to 500 aircraft to China. Boeing is one of America's biggest exporters and used to deliver about a quarter of its planes to China. However, the company has not secured a major Chinese order since US President Donald Trump's first term in office.
Meanwhile, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung raises concerns this week that ongoing tariff negotiations with the US are unsettling his country's foreign exchange market. However, he expresses confidence that both sides will ultimately reach a practical and commercially sound agreement.
His remarks came during a meeting with US lawmakers in New York on Monday as he was there to attend the United Nations General Assembly. The two countries are currently in talks to revise trade terms, including efforts to reduce import duties imposed during the Trump administration. Lee has previously warned that South Korea's proposed large-scale investments in the US, seen as a key component of the deal, could impact national foreign exchange reserves. Despite the risks, Lee maintained a positive outlook as he believed a balanced resolution would be found through continued dialogue.
The U.S. signals it could expand sanctions on Brazilian officials. This comes just days after it targets the wife of Supreme Court Justice Alexandra de Moraes, who oversees the criminal case against former President Jair Bolsonaro.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said further measures remained on the table. He cautioned that financial institutions engaging with sanctioned individuals could also face penalties, stressing that Brazilian banks needed to carefully weigh the consequences. Bessent defended the decision to sanction the judge's wife, saying Washington considered her actions inseparable from her husband's conduct. The Brazilian government swiftly hit back. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry condemned the sanctions as an affront to national sovereignty and declared that Brazil would not yield to what it described as another act of aggression.
In other news, U.S. tech giant NVIDIA is set to invest up to $100 billion in OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT. NVIDIA says it will provide the high-performance chips needed to power the massive computing capacity required for artificial intelligence, an area where OpenAI has become a global leader.
The agreement calls for systems capable of deploying 10 gigawatts of computing power, enough to power millions of homes, across new data centers dedicated to training and running OpenAI's models. The move comes as OpenAI looks to diversify its infrastructure and reduce reliance on Microsoft, its largest backer and cloud provider. Reuters and Bloomberg report that the deal begins with $10 billion in cash, with additional funding released as computing capacity comes online. NVIDIA will receive equity in OpenAI as part of the agreement. Investors responded positively, sending NVIDIA shares up nearly 4% in New York trading, adding to a 37% gain this year.
Top diplomats of the U.S., South Korea, and Japan issued a joint statement today, voicing concern over increasingly frequent destabilizing activities around Taiwan. The three ministers also strongly opposed unlawful maritime claims in the South China Sea and any attempts to enforce them. While the statement did not directly mention China, it comes amid rising tensions in the disputed waters.
The joint statement followed a meeting in New York during the United Nations General Assembly, where U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Japan's Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya, and South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Hyun discussed security and economic issues in the Indo-Pacific. Taiwan welcomed the move, with its foreign ministry spokesperson saying Taipei would continue working with three countries and other partners to maintain peace and stability in both the Taiwan Strait and the wider Indo-Pacific region. China claims nearly the entire South China Sea, overlapping the exclusive economic zones of Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Ownership disputes over islands and rifts have fueled years of friction in the region.
That report wraps up AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the rivalries, strategies, and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more, head on to international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching and good night.